Recording.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on October 10, 2021 Global Technopolitics Forum's research meeting. I think Jennifer just joined us. I could see here.
Yes.
Yes. Hello.
Hello,
Hello,
Jennifer.
Jennifer.
Okay,
Hi.
maybe, yeah, we start with Jennifer. Would you tell us what have you been researching?
Yeah, so I tried to focus this week on figuring out like why the crackdown was happening, like we talked about, and I found a really good article that kind of broke down sector by sector what like China's been looking at, and perhaps why. A lot of it is saying that like from the beginning she hasn't really like enjoyed, or not enjoyed, but like been a proponent of the Western capitalism that China's kind of been engaging in, like before him, and that he wants to return to the traits of the Chinese Communist Party that, you know, it was kind of founded on based on Mao, especially on its 100-year anniversary. And he has said like his common prosperity agenda really is to like commit to conformity as an ideology and intolerance of like huge challenges to the regime. And that is definitely extreme wealth inequity in his years. And he thinks that over the past 40 years, as China has attempted to do more business with Western countries, there's just been a huge rise in that inequity. So his Red New Deal actually has like some genuine public support in China because a lot of people who are part of the masses and not making tons of money at the top like really do feel as though capitalism hasn't been their friend. So this deal is like a promise to reduce inequality and improve life for those people. And so the 19 ongoing crackdowns I found were in fintech, e-commerce, and social media, celebrity and fan culture. Those with extremely high incomes, tutoring and like private education firms, gaming, transportation sharing, and power bank sharing. So like Uber and those kind of firms, companies that are actually trying to IPO in the United States, companies that rely heavily on algorithms, cloud computing firms that work with the state, Bitcoin and crypto companies, mining companies related to that, real estate, private investment funds, online rental platforms like Airbnb type companies, beauty and packaged food brands, high frequency stock traders, virtual reality and augmented reality, and casinos. And some like common threads I found there were that the sectors that they're turning towards are those with high influence over people, like fandoms or video games, algorithms, and consumer products. Those with like high financial impact to the economy and to the people's personal wallets, like real estate, crypto, and investments. And then those that have a high amount of access to consumer data, like privacy. Those with algorithms, short-term rental companies, fintech, those IPOing in the United States that have a high amount of private Chinese data. And so that's what I found be interesting. And then it kind of broke down, examples of that. And I did definitely find that to be in line, like even banning tutoring sector that wanted to go public, but isn't. Like the party was like, we want to keep education public. We want to make sure that like there is not a high cost of education. And also that was in line with the fact that like China's actively trying to raise its population, and they see the high cost of education as a direct obstacle to boosting birth rates. So that's a reason why they don't want to make sure that education prices don't go up, or that people view like private education and tutoring as a necessity in order to have a well-educated child. So yeah, that's kind of what I found this week, because I was trying to dig into like why this crackdown is happening. And then I also saw like a Wall Street Journal article that was interesting that kind of said like Xi is changing the rules because he fears that private companies are getting too much power, inherently distrusts capitalism, and does not like the way that it's playing out currently in the United States. You know, he does, like, if you look at Facebook even, who, you know, has so much power and is constantly testifying in front of the Senate and this and that, like they are basically, these companies, Facebook, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, like they're basically government players at this point in the United States. And Xi sees that and it says like he does not want that future for China. So he wants to kind of get ahead of the curve and shut it down while it's like kind of about to happen or already happening. So that I thought made a lot of sense as well. And I thought I wanted to get your guys' thoughts before I dove deeper into it.
Yeah, that makes good sense to me. It's that's a big help, I think, particularly when you look at the particular targets. Yeah. And so there's a hint to me that, she understands that he's not going to succeed in making China rich, and therefore has to, at least not soon, and therefore has to do something about inequality.
And I think, at first, like when Deng Xiaoping in 1978 turned China capitalist, it was a quote that was like, it's an era of reform, and he wanted to quote, let a few people get rich first.
Right.
Yeah, I think there are several things in here. One is the aspect of it, of course, is control.
Which state funds have to bail out the economy. And he just...
Right. Jennifer, are you breaking?
Can you repeat that? Yes. Sorry, a second, you broke up.
All right. Are you finished?
Yes.
Okay, so I think there are several different reasons for that. One, of course, is the control of data, but then she also runs a campaign of winning the hearts and minds of people. And I think there is a lot of that as well. As Greg mentioned, and as you mentioned, it shows a genuine concern about inequalities to people. So that's another aspect of it. Also, he has mentioned that he doesn't like the way that entrepreneurs have become role model. He prefers that the public figures, political figures, to be role model for the young, for the youth. So I think that's another aspect of it, the image, and a move basically from this purely market-based or emphasis on market-based forces to more of the Leninist style of ruling. I think it's a combination of things that make act in the way that he's acting. And I had a very interesting webinar I watched, which I should send it for you. It was a very deep analysis of the situation by, who was it, Greg? I think I sent you a link. It was from Kevin.
Kevin Rudd, the former Australian Prime Minister.
Yes.
Okay.
Interesting, analysis he has.
Yeah, he's good. He's good.
Yeah. Any comments from you, Puran or Eduardo?
No comments. Thanks, Pari.
I have a bit to add to it, Pari. And what I have been watching out, and which has been playing out far and wide, is that China at the moment is trying to work in ways whereby it could probably slow the democracies down. So it is not about data, it is not about privacy. It is all about, creating a facade whereby Chinese could probably try and, up the ante and try and prove the world at large that communism, with all its defect and, bad things around, is still, thriving, prospering, and doing much better than democracies. And in that context, I would like to also say that we will have to really watch out what happens to Taiwan. If not this year, 2023, 2024, because in the internal assessment of Taiwanese authorities, they're saying that if everything goes the way it is, Chinese are really going to merge Taiwan by 2025. So they are trying to up the ante and trying to prove that their system is superior to and much better than, coalition of willing from democracies around the world who are trying to come through a quasi coalition in, both Asia Pacific and elsewhere. I think this is the broader game plan which Xi is trying to play out, and that would be really something which we will really need to watch out for, because he is not really playing a small game. In that game, he could probably get defeated as well. But if he wins, then what will be, a little bad place to be in. So he is playing that geopolitical game in a very different kind of a context altogether, where Chinese are trying to prepare some kind of a scenario and trying to figure out how the pulse of the world is moving. And then Taiwan would be the test case for some kind of an influence between who wins, whether democracies win or President Xi wins. And that's the kind of a wider game plan which China is trying to play out. I mean, this is what is my assessment, with everything being there: poverty, inequality, people are still suffering, human rights are not there, all those things, being around, other things being equal, as we call it in economics. This is the wider game that President Xi is trying to play.
Mhm, mhm.
2017, he mentioned that, he said that for the next 30 years, there will be a problem with United States, and therefore they have to completely reorganize their strategy, geopolitical strategy. So without a doubt, he's trying to ensure that his economy is less reliant to outside and more focused on internal consumption. So shifting the focus on that sense, shifting the focus in lots of other areas, and basically recalibrating and reorganizing everything. He has also been very Machiavellian character in terms of the power games inside the country. So yeah, it's worth watching, but he's trying to organize everything from different aspects. So the scene or the context is ready for larger movements that he wants to take.
Yeah, no. I think it's all exactly right. It is hard to continue to puzzle over it, but it is. You can see some of the. I think you can, as you all have said, see some of the powerful reasons for what he's doing. The timing still seems to be a little curious, but maybe it's partly given that the party Congress is next year. This is also a way of maybe demonstrating some change, demonstrating he's in control. So those things, I think, are probably exacerbated by the upcoming party Congress.
Yeah, and I think he's well prepared to take some short-term pain for a long-term gains among the people. So the crackdown on tech giants is not accident. It's very calculated move, preparing him for next year election, and I don't know, removing the limit.
Right.
Eduardo, any comments?
Not at the moment. Thanks. All right.
So I think it's good time to switch to your project, Eduardo. So
Okay.
are you happy with the data and everything?
Yes. It's all literature that I'm still reviewing. But first, let me apologize if I don't turn my camera on. I got a neck sprain this morning, and currently I'm horizontal right now. So we'll go with just voice.
Great to have you with us. I hope you feel better.
Thanks. Yeah, it's better already. I did a silly movement this morning when I got up, and then I realized that my age is starting to I have to pay my price. So, but anyways, here we are. Yeah, I'd like to update you all on the second chapter of the book, which I'm putting together. And Greg and others, I think Perry may have told you that we're organizing a potential presentation in this forum of this chapter. So I think, Perry, we're aiming for mid-November. Is that correct?
Yes.
So you all have a chance to see that chapter in a short 20-minute presentation that I'm putting together with some research assistants. But in essence, the chapter is looking at the ways that governments and government-funded initiatives have been collecting data about the human body. It's part of a 3-chapter section. This chapter will look at governments collecting data about the body. The second part will look at governments collecting data about psychological aspects of our everyday activities. And the third chapter of this first part will look at sociological data. So commercial transactions, voting, and other types of sociological type information about us. But this one chapter is looking at the so-called informatized body, which is all the ways that governments organize information about our physical bodies. And it starts with a historical discussion about various initiatives, particularly in law enforcement, For example, the Bertillon system, in which the body was classified according to its physical aspects. Looks also at some initiatives by the eugenicists movement. Then we also look at some of the early facial recognitions and fingerprints, and how all these different programs kind of fed into the reality that we have today, in which governments do in fact collect a lot of information about our physical bodies, starting with the many facial recognition and facial emotion recognition programs that classify our bodies in ways that informatize it, therefore make it digital information. And then what can be done with this body once whether it's private public funded programs, that what can be done with this information. And then the section of the chapter that I worked on today, and I'll wrap up, is looking at future trends. And it seems that biotech industry is making some very interesting advances in the way that wearables and contactless sensors can collect a whole array of information about our physical bodies, including things like blood chemistry level, hormone levels. Now, at the moment, governments are involved in this only indirectly, as they fund these mostly private initiatives. But I do consider what would happen in a hypothetical future should some of this information about our bodies, like hormone levels, blood chemistry, et cetera, be available to public agencies, to state agencies, and what the implications for citizenship and privacy is in those scenarios. So that's the chapter that I'll be presenting in a couple of weeks. It's finished now, but it's still in rough form. But I'm trying to polish it up for submission to you folks and your feedback on it.
Oh, great. We'll look forward to it, Eduardo. That's terrific.
Thanks, Greg.
Eduardo, my question is, to what extent this event could be public? To what extent you want to keep it private? Because I remember you had some concerns about about your book, and there was information you wanted to keep private. So to what extent we can publicize it?
I'm very happy if we open it up to the public, and I'm glad to do that. Just if perhaps I'd like to share the chapter with you all before, but perhaps we could just share the presentation with the public during the event, but the chapter we can circulate more just internally. That'd be great.
Good, fantastic. And then I have another ethical question. I wonder. First of all, is this information going to be in slices in the hand of government, or are they turning to big data? And what is the best place to keep this data, private sector or public sector? Who would we feel more comfortable with?
Yeah, that's a great question. In fact, that's the central theme of the chapter, in which we look at different models around the world. I use examples from the United States, New York City, where I live, where I plan on, in fact, doing some field work. Detroit, I look also at examples from the East, obviously China, but then I also have included some examples from the global South, particularly Myanmar and Brazil, because I like to compare and contrast the different models that are emerging. And obviously they're on a range. So on one side, you have fully public, so only governments, especially when it comes to facial recognition technology. So who's funding it and who's creating it? Then in the middle, and this is most cases, including China, you have a private-public partnership. And then in some cases, like in the United States, it's mostly private organizations, including in the United States, what I'm looking at is the public housing, the use of facial recognition in public housing. So the way that the private companies are selling their software systems to the free and subsidized housing for largely minority communities, and then how this facial recognition software is collecting data on people's faces, essentially. Now, the central theme is, even though they're mostly private-public partnerships, in most cases, it's the state that is funding the private company, And eventually the state might come around and ask for its so-called pound of flesh and say, we want a slice of this. We want to have access to it, in much the same way that has occurred with telecommunications informations and, for example, social media and internet usage.
But the question is, where are we going to feel more comfortable, on a commercial private sector who would sell that information, or on a public sector which is going to turn it to big data?
You know, I hope you all can help me figure that out in the presentation. Maybe we can make that kind of the central topic of the Q&A and the discussion, because I'm still sort of getting my feet wet in what's happening. So this chapter, as you may recall, the book is organized in 3 parts. This chapter is very descriptive of what has happened, is happening, what is likely to happen. The next chapter will include interviews and finally, the next section will include interviews with policymakers and innovators in the field. And while the last part will include fieldwork with people who are on the receiving end of these technologies. So I hope that the book as a whole addresses that question. But at the moment, any guidance I can get from you folks would be really useful.
What's been striking to me for the last few years is that there is this big European-American difference, right? That the Europeans are much more comfortable with the government having this data, while most Americans are a lot more comfortable with the private sector having it. Maybe partly because they don't know how much data on them the private sector has, but in general, it seems to be the attitude in the United States is, well, at least Google can't put us in jail, right? And therefore, there's a lot more tolerance of private sector holding this stuff, while the Europeans tend to be very skeptical of private companies and much more confident in their governments.
Is it elected is at the end?
Yeah, that's very true. The European Union is playing a pretty large role in this. And recently, especially, there's been some legislation to that effect I've seen in the news.
Any comments, Puran? Any comment, Jennifer?
No comments. That sounds great.
Okay. So is it also, I wanted to thank you, Puran, for putting us in touch with several entities that is global entities around the world. So I look forward to that. The report on 5G is finally finished, so it will be published soon. And is there anything, Greg, you want to discuss?
I might just talk about what I did this week. I gave a presentation based on our data governance and geopolitics paper to a small gathering in New York. I was virtual, not physical. I should have been physical because it was quite a gathering. It was small, but the centerpiece was really Henry Kissinger and his new book on artificial intelligence. Henry was there, and at whatever age he is, 96, 7, very articulate, not very mobile, but very articulate. And his theme of this book is that AI basically is as big a deal in terms of how humans think, and even how humans think of themselves as humans, as the Enlightenment. So he thinks this AI is a very big, I don't know, we call it turning point, a paradigm shift. He always starts with these illustrations of the alpha chess game, where alpha managed to create strategies and moves that humans never had, and that hadn't conceived and maybe even couldn't conceive. And that's kind of his starting point. And so he's I think, pessimistic, but interesting about it. He also makes the point that in the Enlightenment, there were philosophers, Leibniz and Spinoza and others, who could help us make the transition to the Enlightenment. In his view, nothing like that exists now. And to some extent, I guess he's right that this is mostly driven by the technologists, not by others. And so anyway, it was very, very interesting. Eric Schmidt, his co-author, turned up as well. And I would have liked to have heard more of Schmidt. He was really quite interesting, I thought. But it was a good gathering and not a bad place to showcase the forum. So we'll hope to see some echoes from it. I have the galleys of the book. If anybody's interested, I'll be happy to share them with you.
Yeah, no, that was Very interesting, and thank you very much for presenting the forum there. That was really kind. And I think what I gathered from it was one of the things he emphasized, that enlightenment happened and then technology was developed to empower the enlightenment philosophy. Here, a technology has developed without a philosophy, in search for a philosophy. And that's one thing, something that concerns him. The last thing I find a bit concerning was his prediction of a violent future, some sort of, he says that light leads to dark and there is a violence period ahead, which is very concerning. I didn't quite get what he means. I like to investigate or study that more. But yeah, I appreciate if you can share those chapters of the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I too was struck by his sense that violence is going to be a violent period. I couldn't quite hear exactly why, so I pursued it a little bit. If I get a better answer, I'll circulate it to all of us.
I have seen some talks from him also pointing to Taiwan, some sort of beginning of some nasty kind of events, perhaps, but I don't know. I need to read it. I haven't read it yet. Some guess.
Yeah.
From anybody?
Well, Pari, I mean, I wanted to give you a piece of information that on 20th of this month, I'll be moderating a panel which is on climate crisis ahead of COP26, which is happening in Glasgow. And there I'm sort of trying to have 4 panelists, one from India, who is a retired Indian ambassador to Brussels. Then the second one is from Europe. Third one is from Africa. And the fourth one is from Paris. So this will be taking place on 20th. And I'll be moderating that panel, and I'll be very happy to send you the link to this program, because I got that link only today, about an hour back. So I'll be very happy to pass that link on to you. And just in case you would like to sort of see if there are colleagues, and both within the forum and beyond the forum, I'll be very happy to have them on. That would be live as well on Facebook and other social media. So just to update you by way of this little thing which I am going to be doing on 20th of October, 6:30 India time, and then whichever way it plays out, that would be. But I'll be very happy to send you the link, which you could probably have a look at.
Thank you. You mentioned
Thank you.
social media or not? You said something about social media I missed.
That would also be up and running on social media, I think.
Okay.
YouTube or Facebook. So anybody and everybody could sort of join in and watch it live as well.
Puran, do you have a Twitter account?
No, I don't.
All right.
I don't.
You can tweet about it and put it on website so people would see and join. Thank you very much. That's very interesting. Thank you. Any comment from anybody else? No? Okay, then thank you very much for being here. I wish you all a wonderful week ahead, and see you next week.
Great. Good week, everybody.
Thanks, Barry. Bye.
Okay.
Bye.